Hi, I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and today I'm continuing my retrospective on 2024 as a whole, and I'm talking about my favorite horror TV shows of the year. I normally do like my favorite horror movies, but this year there were a lot of really interesting horror, or at least horror-adjacent TV shows that I felt I'd be remiss if I didn't find a way to talk about them. So, just for them, just because of what I love this year, I wanted to do a top five horror TV shows of the year. Let's get started. Number 5, Agatha All Along. I know what you're saying, I know what you're thinking, is this really a horror show? It's Marvel. It's the closest they're going to get to horror, though, and I kind of dig it. I dig all the witchcraft, I dig, death is in it, and just like the Witch's Road. I dig the stakes. I dig that each episode is its own challenge, and that, again, not to get too into spoilers, it's not afraid to kill people off, and most importantly, it's not afraid to let Agatha be a villain at times. She is a villain, and yes, while she's kind of more of an anti-hero in this, it still lets her do messed up things, especially the further on you get, and you're like, oh my god, this show is not letting her off the hook the way WandaVision let Wanda off the hook at the end of that. And it kind of makes up for that a little bit. So I love Catherine Hahn in this. I love how each episode, again with the challenges on the Witch's Road, the show gave itself a way to always have fresh, unique set designs and setups and costumes, and just kind of be creative with it. I wasn't crazy about the last episode, but I think the next to last episode is a really interesting climax that just gives me that horror element I've been waiting for in the MCU, that I was promised in Doctor Strange 2 and didn't get, that I kind of got Werewolf by Night, but got a full season of it with Agatha All Along. Number 4, Chucky, Season 3, Part 2. This brings Chucky into new directions. It's been how many years, how many movies, how many sequels, how many seasons of the TV show that Chucky's kind of doing the same thing. Yes, things changed up a bit when he's able to make copies of himself in Cult of Chucky. But I kind of love seeing Chucky age here. I love seeing an immortal, murderous doll kind of face his own mortality in a way that he hasn't since he became the killer doll, because he always finds a way to come back. And I love that, again, it's upping the stakes. Earlier in the season we saw Chucky in the White House. He's going full nuclear war here. He's taking everything about him and just elevating it, all while giving us really interesting insights into his backstory and giving us a really cool episode with Brad Dourif live in person, something that we saw in Curse of Chucky, not a whole lot of, but I love that it lets him act and show his face and be Charles Lee Ray, because I feel like the franchise really didn't get much of that at all, other than, there's the opening scene in the first movie, and then, like I said, the little bit in Curse, and I love that the show kind of gives us that. I love John Waters as the founder of the Good Guy dolls, the creator, I should say. I love the way that it ends on that weird, absurd cliffhanger, even though the show got canceled, and we're never going to find out, unless, I know Don Mancini announced he's doing another movie. I hope that its continuity picks up right where the season left off. It just, for a show that I felt like in the beginning struggled, how they're going to keep doing stuff with Chucky, they found some really interesting things to do with Chucky in at least these 4 episodes. Number 3, The Creep Tapes. I'm a huge fan of the first 2 Creep movies, and when this show started, I loved, each episode feels like a little mini movie, and we're kind of getting an exploration of Peach Fuzz and how creepy Mark Duplass can get and how uncomfortable he can make his fellow actor and us, the audience. And then those last 2 episodes kind of just took things to the next level. If it had just been 6 episodes that felt like mini Creep movies, this wouldn't be on the list. But it's those last 2 episodes that actually take a step further and say, let's go further into this guy's psyche, and let's explore him a little bit, and let's change up the formula in a way that's really, really interesting, that I don't want to spoil too much, just that we get more into his mind and it is a scary, scary place. Number 2, Teacup. This was a Peacock original based on a novel that I didn't really hear anything about until it came out, and it just wound up being this really interesting, compelling sci-fi paranoid thriller. You know, it definitely had elements of The Thing where you don't know who to trust, you don't know who's assassin, and it all culminates where you can't trust anybody. And as a parent myself, oh my god, that the scene where they're trying to get the assassin out of their daughter by drowning her, it went places I didn't think it would go for like a network Peacock original. I loved the paranoia, and it was just a really interesting, well thought out story. It was based on a book, and it shows. It fleshed out its characters. I love that, you have the husband and wife that already don't trust each other because of some stuff he's been doing before any of this starts, which just makes it even harder when it does start. I hesitate to even call it quite horror. It's more sci-fi thriller, but I think it has enough horror elements, and it kept me guessing and kept me coming up, well, I gotta find out what happens next. That it has earned its number 2 spot on my list. And finally, number 1, Hysteria. Speaking of Peacock originals that feature Bruce Campbell as the police chief in a late 80s set horror comedy about the Satanic Panic, what a show. Just everything between, I love that era. It's the era I was born. On the surface, this just feels like a horror comedy, kind of exploring, what it's like to be a teenager and trying to fit in. I love anything like demonic or possession related. It has an exorcism. It deals with the religious extremism, and then, those characters wind up being more frustrating and scary than the other characters. What really gets me about the show, and the reason why it's number 1, is every single character arc, every single storyline, every single plot point has a tonal consistency that you really don't see. It all feeds back into the idea that, well, like the title is, hysteria, and how dangerous and how much like a virus fear really is. Every single thing that happens in the show feeds back into that one narrative in a way that just everything pieces together at the end perfectly. This was a show that I'm always more of a movie fan than a TV show fan, and I kept coming back for the next episode with this. And it wasn't just because I love Bruce Campbell and he's entertaining. It was that at its core, it's a really interesting, compelling story with great characters that happens to have fun elements of horror and that happens to also be really funny. Those elements are just toppings on what is already an excellent sundae of a TV show. But hey, this is just my list. These are just my favorite horror shows of the year. I would love to know what yours are. Let me know in the comments what were your favorite horror TV shows of 2024. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may be trapped on a farm in rural Georgia with weird aliens and not know who you can trust and who you can't. That's the plot of Teacup. And as always, every day is Halloween.